When I was a child, I would always go camping with my grandparents at the end of each school year. I would always look forward to it, since I grew up loving the outdoors and the woods. I especially loved camping, making s'mores, going on long hikes, sitting around the campfire. I loved it all. Having grown up in California near the cities, the forest was my favorite place away from home. I always preferred being near trees and dirt rather than buildings and crowded places. Besides, the woods were much quieter and more peaceful. I always felt safe when I was there, like nothing could ever hurt me. But something strange would always happen at the end of the month of May. I would have this recurring dream during the last week of my school year. I would be in the woods, walking alone down a dirt trail. The woods were always strangely quiet. I would continue to walk this path until I saw this red fox poke its head from behind a tree. Its eyes were always strangely human-like, but they were yellow and somehow looked like teddy bear eyes, and it would just stare at me. It wouldn't make a sound at all. It would just watch me. Usually in my dream, I would go up and pet it. That would make the fox make a noise, usually a soft growl. Then I would continue walking, and it would follow me. I had this dream for the first time when I was around 5 years old, and it would happen every night during the last week of school every year until I was 11. Over the years, it would be the same exact thing. I would walk in the woods, find this fox, pet it, and then continue my hike with it alongside me. But about the fourth time I had this dream, the fox would start to walk behind me. That's when I started to feel uneasy about this fox. I could hear it making odd noises, but every time I went back to look, it was just walking like nothing was wrong, even somehow giving me a smile. While the dream started to make me feel uneasy, I just felt it was an odd dream. So when I went with my grandparents to go camping after my completion of kindergarten, it was the last thing I thought of. Of course, I was very excited about the trip. I was barely able to keep myself in my classroom seat for the last day of kindergarten. My grandparents were there to pick me up right as the bell rang. They already had the camping trailer attached to my grandpa's truck. I remember he drove an old red truck that only had 3 seats, and I always sat in the middle. It took about 2 hours to get there, and another good hour to find our usual camping spot. It was deep into the woods and far from other people, as my grandma wasn't too fond of being around other people while we camped. As they were setting up the camping trailer, I wandered around the campsite. I loved to dig in the dirt for bugs. I had sat down on the dirt and started to dig, but I noticed how strangely quiet the woods were. It was never quiet, not even in the dead of night. I thought it was odd, but being only 6, I didn't think too hard about it. As I continued to dig for bugs, however, I thought I had heard my grandmother call for me. Sugar Booger. She would usually call me Sugar Booger, that being a nickname she gave me since I was born. That's what I had heard, but it sounded like she was very far away and somewhat sick. I looked up where I heard it come from and noticed that was coming from the woods, but there was no way she was there because she was still unloading stuff from the truck. Even at the age of 6, it didn't feel right, so I walked closer to my grandparents and stayed next to them. I soon forgot about the weird encounter, though, as we began to have fun. For the rest of that day, we played card games, sat next to the campfire as we ate dinner, and stared up into the stars. I always loved seeing the stars. They were so hard to see in the city, but out in the woods, they were so clear. We started to get sleepy around 9 p.m., and we started to get ready for bed. There were bunk beds that me and my grandma would sleep on. We would keep our luggage on the top bunk, and we would sleep on the bottom bunk. Due to my grandpa's snoring, he would sleep on the couch of the trailer. I would always sleep next to the trailer window, just in case I couldn't sleep and wanted to look outside. But that night, I fell asleep pretty quickly though. I remember waking up maybe hours later. It was still pitch black outside. I've always had issues staying asleep, so it wasn't all that weird for me to wake up in the middle of the night. I rolled onto my side, trying to fall back asleep. That's when I heard it. Sugar Booger. My eyes immediately shot open as I heard my nickname being spoken, but I knew it wasn't either of my grandparents. They were both asleep and never were known to sleep talk before. I started to feel this horrible feeling in my gut, like whatever I was hearing wanted to really hurt me. Even at the age of 6, I knew this wasn't normal. Then I started to hear tapping at the trailer window. It was soft, but loud enough for me to hear it. I just sat there, frozen in fear. I was trying to just brush it off as tree branches or rain, but I just knew that wasn't it. I could tell that was really someone, or something, tapping on the window. Then I decided to be brave and look. Big mistake. I pulled the curtain away to only peek, and all I saw were these large yellow eyes. They seemed glassy, yet not entirely real. They looked like giant teddy bear eyes, but cold and unwelcoming. I remember at that moment I panicked and quickly closed the curtain back up. I then hid under the blanket, that being the only thing I knew to do when I saw a monster. I could feel tears falling down my face. I never had been so terrified in my life. I just curled up into my grandma's side and clung to her all night long, that damn tapping only getting louder and more persistent throughout the night. I don't remember falling asleep, but somehow I did. I do remember my grandpa waking me up around noon. He was telling me that if I hurried, we could still go fishing. I honestly didn't want to leave the trailer at all. I was terrified that whatever I saw the night before would be out there. I did eventually go outside, but I was constantly looking around, horrified that whatever I saw the night before would get me. When we got back from fishing, my grandma immediately knew I was scared and pulled me into a hug and asked what was wrong. I decided to tell her the truth about what I saw and heard. Surprisingly, she believed me. The next thing I knew, she was telling my grandpa that we were moving campsites. It took a bit to convince him, but he did eventually start to pack up and hook the trailer onto his truck. I was put into the truck so I could sleep properly, but I just couldn't. I kept feeling that I was being watched, thinking that every little noise was that thing I saw, that if I closed my eyes even for a second, it would get me. My grandma wasn't too far from me when I heard again, but this time, it was my actual name, Aaliyah. In that moment, I had never seen my grandma move so fast. She looked up into the bushes where we heard it, then to me. She then got in the truck with me and pulled me into a tight, protective hug. I began to cry all over again, telling her how I wanted to just go back home. That's when my grandpa got into the truck as well, and since I was sobbing so hard to the point I was coughing, he agreed we could go home. We started to head out of the campsite. I remember feeling depressed that something had ruined the trip, but I still didn't know what it was. That's when something in my head told me to look back. I slowly did so, feeling an ice-cold fear wash over me as I saw something. A red fox, sitting in the middle of the campsite, sitting there with large yellow eyes. Same red fox from my dream, somehow curling its lips into an eerie smile. After that encounter, we never did go back to that campsite. We did continue to camp, but in more populated areas. I didn't tell my grandma what I saw, but she had told me to trust my gut. She knew that I was sensitive to certain things, and that it would help me if I trusted it. Now, fast forward to when I was 17. By this time, I knew very well what a skinwalker was, and I was still very paranoid every time I went near wooded areas. I still worried about seeing that fox, but as the years passed, I stopped thinking about it so much. It was Christmas vacation, and me and my 2 younger siblings were going to stay at a relative's house up in the mountains for a few days. I didn't mind the house. I still loved the woods, no matter what happened. Although at night, I hated how they didn't close the window curtains. But I did feel safe while inside the house, knowing that they wouldn't let anything hurt us kids. Luckily, it didn't snow where they lived, so we could go outside and run around. They also had this beautiful black lab named Pam, who was about a year old at the time. She was very playful and normally wouldn't listen to anyone but my uncle. Although she was easily excitable, she was a good puppy. One of the days we were there, my little sister and our aunt went out to the store for a nice girls' day. Although I'm a girl, I wanted to go hiking with my uncle and my little brother. We left pretty early since the hike we were going on was 4 hours of walking into town. It was a really chilly morning, but since we were doing so much walking, it felt great. We also decided to take Pam, as it was a good way for her to get exercise and have fun. About maybe an hour into our walk, I started to slow down a bit. The forest was beautiful and I wanted to enjoy it. It was so peaceful, I could have honestly stayed there. But as we continued to walk, I started to feel something odd. I noticed how quiet the forest had suddenly become, hearing only our footsteps and my brother talking to our uncle. Pam noticed it too, her ears going straight up and growling softly. I started to pick up my pace to get next to my brother, worried that possibly a coyote or mountain lion was nearby, though I knew that they wouldn't be out at this time. Even if they were, they didn't walk near the roads. My little brother was only 9 at that time, and being the oldest sibling, my natural instincts to protect him kicked in. My uncle noticed the silence as well, telling us to stay close to him and Pam, who was now next to me and still growling. I began to feel that horrible feeling again, that ice-cold fear I once felt when I was 6. I tried so hard to not think of the creature, but it was all I could worry about. I was scared. I felt like I was back to being that scared little girl again. I had to stop for a moment though, seeing my shoelace had come undone. I quickly kneeled down to tie it back up, trying to hurry and just get out of there. That's when I heard it. Aaliyah. In that moment, my heart dropped into my stomach. My eyes widened, and I could just feel myself start to shake from fear. It was right next to me. I heard it clear as day. I slowly turned my head, and there it was, that same red fox, still having those horrid yellow eyes, and that same demented smile. Only this time, I saw it much more clearly. Its fur looked matted and disgusting. The smell it had was like rotten, decaying flesh mixed with garbage. Its limbs were much too long for a normal fox, the back legs bending completely the wrong way. Those eyes were still the worst thing about it, but now they looked emptier than I had remembered. I wanted to scream, to run, to cry, but I just couldn't. I was frozen as I was too scared to even blink. Then I heard it speak again. This time, however, it had mimicked my little brother's voice. "Found you." Before anything else could happen, Pam suddenly jumped in front of me and started to bark like mad, snapping and growling so aggressively that it scared me out of my frozen trance. When I looked back, it was gone. I used that moment to run over to my brother and uncle, who didn't see the creature as they were too far ahead now, but I heard my uncle start to pray and sing a song under his breath, keeping my brother and myself close to him. I was just too scared to even look back, so I just kept my eyes on the ground and refused to stop walking. Pam had stopped barking, but she was still loudly growling and never left my side as we continued our hike. My little brother was a bit worried, but he just thought it was a coyote. When we finally made it into town, my uncle called our aunt and told her to come pick us up, saying something about how it wasn't safe for us to walk back. Thankfully, she did come and get us, but she was confused since we talked about that hike for days. On the car ride back, Pam never left me alone. She was right with me the entire time. She knew that that thing was after me, and she protected me. I was very grateful that she was with us. Who knows what would have happened if she wasn't. When we got back to the house, I was talked to by my aunt and uncle. Once I told them what happened and what I saw, they started to pray and check that all the locks were shut tight. My aunt put something around the doors. I now believe it was probably ashes, but I never did find out. Unfortunately, this cut our Christmas vacation short, as they were worried that I was not safe while still in the woods. We had to be taken home the next day. They made an excuse of how there was an emergency with a friend and that they had to help them out. I felt horrible that Christmas was ruined, but once I did leave the woods, I truly felt safe again. Before they had to drive back home though, they told me that it wasn't my fault, and that luckily it didn't hurt me or the other kids. It did make me feel a bit better. I've since left California and now live in Kentucky. I feel safe, but I still have questions. Is it targeting me? Why is it searching for me? What are its plans for me? Is it still out there, looking for me? It does make me feel a bit uneasy, knowing that I may never have the answers. Thanks for watching this video to the end. I really appreciate all the support you guys have shown. Be sure to like and comment on the video. Also, if you aren't already a subscriber, go ahead and subscribe now, as well as hit the bell to be notified when new videos go live. You can also find my links for Facebook and Twitter below in the description. Thanks again, and I'll see you guys in the next video.